Hello gamers, how are we today? Good? Hopefully. Today I am good as I just had a very fun time enjoying a new game, Robocop Rogue City, a game based on the 1987 film, well, called Robocop if you couldn't guess, which surprisingly I have never seen before in its entirety. I've just seen clips here and there, so I am going into this game with fresh eyes. All I know about the movie is that Alex Murphy was a cop who died and then was turned into Robocop, a Terminator-like cyborg with like aimbot and whose whole life now is to uphold the law. And that is all I know, so I assume that this game makes a fair amount of references and in-jokes that I just won't get, so I probably won't mention much of them throughout this video. But that's okay, I may just make myself look stupid at some points. Well, more than I normally make myself look stupid. So, before we talk about the game itself, it is time to talk about the game's graphics, a segment I bring up in almost every video, and most games I talk about get a pretty good outcome. Maybe this will be different, as I have finally learned that there is a new standard for graphics in the year of 2024, of course the year of our Lord. And I can't keep on comparing modern games to games like from the early 2000s. Robocop uses a semi-realistic look, and look good it does, but compared to some other games I have played, it's not the best. So I mean, what am I trying to say? Well, the game looks good, but it's not good enough to the point where it's a selling point, the graphics, if that makes any sense. Like, there was some little pop-in issues, and this, if you look at the city far away, it can look a bit bad at times. But, like, yeah, just graphics were graphics, you know? So, now we can talk about the game itself. First, I want to talk about the setting for the game, that being the incredible city of Detroit, Motor City. Well, I guess it was Motor City. Home to the Detroit Lions, and that's about all I know about the city. And I'm willing to bet that this isn't a very realistic creation of the city, but maybe speaks to what the city was going through back in the early 90s. As I just looked up when this game took place, it takes place between Robocop 2 and 3. I didn't even know there were 3 Robocop movies. And even though I said that those things were the only things I knew about Detroit, that was kind of a lie, as I'm sure most of us are aware that Detroit is a city that has been in a bit of an economic downcline for, well, a very long time, with most of the motoring jobs moving overseas, increasing unemployment and, of course, unfortunately, homelessness. And with the game's custom drug called Nuke being a stand-in for, well, many drug epidemics that sweep across the United States, that's something that makes Rogue City's version of Detroit seem more real than other cities in video games. However, of course, this city has some futuristic aspects to it, mainly being products made by a company by the name of Omni Consumer Products, or OCP for short. One of the main futuristic inventions of OCP being Robocop himself, OCP being the company that revived Alex Murphy's body to be used as a host for the Robocop armor and programs. And I feel this game does a good job, and I hate to say it, of making you feel like Robocop. As Robocop's movement throughout the game whenever you're walking or running just doesn't feel very fluid or smooth, but a bit clunky and slow. How you would expect a man to walk when he is surrounded by about a ton of metal and wires attached to his body. And for the most part, because of this, Robocop is pretty much bulletproof. Not in the way that makes the game too easy, and also, on that note, instead of healing Robocop, you repair him, which I like that little change in wording there. So since Robocop is part machine, part man, throughout the game he has glitches, which are a large part of the game's story. and Robo's quest to prove that he is still human as well. Depending on how you play the game, that is. But on the topic of glitches, I did have one that I wasn't meant to. So I had a game glitch, not the story glitch. And well, to be honest, it wasn't even as bad as I expected it to be though. Like, I heard some bad things going into this game about the glitches. But I personally only had one issue, which was as soon as I found out you could upgrade Robocop's gun, the Auto 9, by changing the circuit board inside of it. I found this out very late game. So I went from basically a bog standard pistol to one where you didn't even need to reload it, which also makes the shooting range super fun, by the way. But I switched it between combat scenarios, and the big graphic press R to reload was stuck on the middle of my screen. And after clearing all the bad guys from that wave, the person who I was protecting would not move forward. However, all I had to do to fix this little glitch was just reload from the last checkpoint. And that got the guy moving. And eventually, the R to reload went away after I left that whole area, which was a bit annoying, but hey, you put up with it, I guess. But moving on from glitches, I mentioned that I learned way too late in the game that you can upgrade the Auto 9 past the first board you get. What does that mean? Well, you can find OCP boards around the world as you adventure out to fight crime. And then as you get better boards, you can add them to your gun and use power modules to upgrade stuff like damage, reload speed, if you even need to reload, that is. And of course, there is also a bonus that lets you increase the amount of gore your gun makes. But you also need to make sure that you don't put too much power percentage into negatives, or if you can, even try to completely bypass any negative effects in the circuit board as much as possible. And of course, there is your classic video game skill tree, although this one being less of a skill tree and more of a skill bar. And this skill tree reminds me of a very good saying: keep it simple, stupid. The game does that very well with its skills, keeping it simple and very clear what skill does what, but not so simple that it's bland or boring, as with each skill increasing affects how Murphy interacts with the world. For example, the engineering skill, which allows Murphy to tell when someone is lying about something more technical, and lets him do more technical things within the environment, like fixing cars or elevators, sort of stuff like that. So after upgrading your gun, it is time to take it out into the world and arrest some criminal scum, or spend like 2 hours at the shooting range in the precinct, which I did a lot of that, hunting down the next high score. Which all that work becomes mute, of course, when you get to the point where you don't need to reload and you have unlimited ammo. But anyways, out in the world, what is the combat like? Well, to be put simply, incredible. I loved it. It never seems too hard, but whenever it started to get even the tiniest bit stale, they would add a new opponent to deal with, also keeping the combat from getting boring. And having the enemies highlight, but not aimbot, I think works pretty well, because obviously I assume that Robocop has aimbot in the movies. But they seem to add that pretty well without making the game way too easy. Also, the fact that you can shoot people in the nether regions to kill them, that's pretty #epic right there. And the guns all seem to pack a punch, but nothing is better than Robocop's Auto 9. So most of the time I just found myself sticking with that gun, unless I got like a grenade launcher or something to have some fun with for a little bit, but I still found myself going back to the Auto 9. That is a cool gun that hits hard, and obviously it has unlimited ammo, so that's probably the reason. And with the gore effects on the Auto 9, it makes people splat into thousands of pieces, which who doesn't love that? Now, I could talk about the combat for a lot longer, but I want to quickly have a wee little rant here before I move on to the final topic. And this is going to be about the one thing in this game that I found truly horrible and annoying, and it just made me dislike the game every time it happened. and that is the large use of slow-mo within the game. There is a skill that gives you the ability to use slow-mo, which I never got, but if you want it, it's fine, it's an ability. However, it's not the only time that slow-mo pops up. Whenever you clear a room, killing the final enemy, it gives you a slow-mo effect after you kill him, which I dislike for the reason that it removes any sort of need to keep your guard up or wondering if there's a guy around the next corner or door. As you know, if it goes slow-mo, you've killed the last guy. And then there's also slow-mo whenever you breach a door, sort of like the classic Call of Duty campaign missions. This one, however, I think is fine. I like that sort of slow-mo. It's just as you breach the room, and it's only for a small amount of time. But I have saved what I felt was the worst for last. Every time you killed one of these enemy types called a fast mover, the game would go into slow-mo. Every time they died, the game would go into slow-mo. So you didn't even have to be near one when they die. A lot of the times I was just walking around the city in the sort of final missions. And then obviously a fast mover that I had maybe shot once before but didn't kill must have crashed into something or something like that. And then you just get a random burst of slow-mo for no reason whatsoever. It's horrible, I hated it. And it's not even like the fast movers were difficult enemies to kill. Like, maybe they were hard to shoot, but they had the same amount of health as everyone else. They're just on motorbikes, so they moved a little faster. But anyways, rant over. Now, apart from that, there is one other thing I felt was a bit of a letdown, that being the lack of impactfulness I felt my choices had. Now, this very much could have been the way I was playing the game. I was playing Robocop as someone who wanted to be classed as human again, and a lot of my choices aligned with achieving that goal. So most of the options, I did pick the quote-unquote light side choice, apart from maybe one of the biggest options in the game, and that being who I endorsed for the mayoralship of Detroit. I backed the OCP candidate, which is put forward as the bad guy, because obviously I forgot to mention, but OCP is an evil corporation, and the sole reason I backed him is that he was promising that as soon as he got made mayor, he would go through the effort to make Robocop legally a human so he could vote and do all the human stuff that humans get to do and be entitled to human rights, I would assume. But as soon as I got John Mills, the OCP candidate, elected, because Robocop basically gets to pick who wins the election, he straight up quit on the first day as the city started to riot and didn't end up enacting the Robocop law.
I can't believe the old man tricked me into running this stuff.
John Mills goes down in the history of the city as its shortest-serving mayor, excluding premature death. He offered his resignation on his very first day of office. According to a reliable source, Mills expressed, and I quote, "I did not sign up to run this dump."
Now maybe that's what I get for backing someone who was paid to become mayor and didn't want the job. So my choice seemed not to matter, although now that I think about it, maybe it's the game trying to say that you mean nothing to corporate America. I don't know, I don't really want to step into that field, but I wonder if I were to pick the other guy, would it have been different? Would he have stayed mayor? Who knows? I don't know. Anyways, that has been my look at Robocop Rogue City as someone who has never played Robocop before. After writing the previous part of this video, I did go and watch a bunch of YouTube videos on references between the game and the movie. And well, it turns out there are a lot more references than even I thought I'd be missing out on, but it doesn't make the game any worse for me, as they were still just funny bits to me, and overall, I would say that this was a good game. Maybe you would get a lot more from the game if you're a Robocop fan going into it, but I feel as a non-Robocop fan, this is still an enjoyable game, and I don't think the references you miss out on ruin it too much. But then again, maybe this isn't the best place for your first experience with Robo. But hey, It can't be any worse, surely. Anyways, I'm gonna go watch the Robocop movie now to see what I've been missing out on.
Could you advise me how a person who would like to try Nuke should go about it?
You're hoping to get your first bag for free? No way! I'm selling at half price anyway! But wait, your voice. You sound like...
A future happy customer.